Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my project as soon as we get the first slide. Thank you. Is that better? Oh, I have to hit this. It's my. How's that? Okay. Now you can help me out here. Is it called Chateauguay or Chateauguay? Okay. So a neighbor, one of my friends who helped me on this project, who's a machinist, lived adjacent to this parcel and told me firmly it was Chateauguay, but I had always said Chateauguay, so thank you. So I was honored to be given this parcel to work with, and I spent a terrific year traipsing all over it. And on the first day, I got to meet Mr. Dick Rose, who was born in 1915. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, but I was very honored that he came out in his walker to greet me with his son and grandson and to show me the forest. So I spent a wonderful day with the foresters traipsing around. The foresters all had bird call apps on their iPhones. So whenever there was a bird, there was a big discussion about what kind of bird it was and where it was. We learned about all the different animals on the site, all the different trees, and I complimented them on their logging because you could never see any traces of it. They were extremely proud of that. So we'd see animal tracks on the trees, animal tracks on the ground, and it was a wonderful way to get to know the land from people with a deep knowledge and love of the land. So I spent the year on the parcel at various times trying to get a sense of what was there. These are various maps. Architects love maps. So I got trail maps. There's old gold mines on the site. There are different parcels of trees. There's lots of trails, lots of streams. And so I was trying to get a way to get at some part of the land. And I made a lot of maps and layers, and it got very complicated, much too complicated. So I ended up deciding to just investigate the topography. It was such a vast 880-acre parcel that there was no way to really get my mind around it. So I used a bunch of different software. This is Illustrator, tracing the topo lines, and then I used Rhino and some other 3D modeling software to try to make various types of topographic models of the site. And then I'm teaching sculpture and digital fabrication now, so that's my current obsession. And so I tried to find a way to make models of this site with various materials and also think about the juxtaposition of the man-made and the idea of the land and the idea of mapping with the reality of the site. And so I used various materials. This is a simple step topo map made on a CNC router using insulation, trying to get a sense of just a regular topo map and what it would look like stepped in 3 dimensions. There was a lot of trial and error here. It looks pretty simple, but whenever I do something, it never turns out right. It seems to take at least 10 tries. So I spent the entire year pretty much making these models, and as we get into them and see them, I made about 15 of them, and they all have between 15 and 80 pieces to them. So my whole house and studio ended up being thousands of pieces, and basically puzzles that I had to put together. So this was one of the popped up 3D models that I used to make the prior router model, and I experimented with different levels of detail, different scales. This is another one that was made out of local Vermont maple, or actually this one was basswood, trying to get a sense of, I like when you cut down through the wood grain that there's another sort of topography line that takes place and becomes evident, and I like the idea that it was local wood. And then I made another series of models that were surface models, and this is another type of mapping, and it's a triangulated surface model, basically, and the blue is actually the errors, the parts that don't match up. In theory, if you cut all this out and put the pieces back together, it folds up perfectly, but the reality was that when I started to fold things back up, they weren't always perfect. But it was another way to try to get at the feeling of the 3D aspect of the land. And so I did 3 or 4 of these at different levels of granulation, and again, different materials. So I made plywood models, cardboard models, board models. And then this was another type of model. I used AutoCAD makes a program, it's really cool, called 123D Make, and you can make a 3D form out of photographs or out of mapping. So I used the Rhino and I imported it into that program, and then that allows you to slice and dice the models in different ways, again at different granularity, and you put in the thickness of the material that you're using, and so this is plexiglass, and it helps you notch out the material and put it back together as a 3D model. But again, I shut off all the numbers, and when you do that, they don't have any numbers, so it gets very confusing quickly when you have hundreds of these pieces trying to put them back together again. But some of the models, I think, did a better job of giving a sense of the land, but none of them obviously do justice to what it really feels like on the site. This is the output from that software, that it notches all the pieces and it cuts them out. So this one I did on the laser cutter. Again, the materials, they were cut multiple times, and I had multiple students helping me do it, and things never turn out right the first time, but I learned a lot in trying to figure it out. I even made a large model in the gallery that's red plexiglass above you that's hanging, and I tried to get a sense of the scale. I wish was bigger, but what the sky touching the land, what that 3D model might be. So this was the model for that, and that was on a large router fabricated. And this is one of the ones in the show that's made out of plywood and put together. So I like this idea of experimenting with the idea of topography, the idea of mapping, how we get a sense of the land conceptually, and then through the computer, but that never ever measured up to the beauty and the majesty of the land. And we really have to thank Mr. Dick Rose. I'm so grateful I got a chance to meet him and spend the day with his family on the land. It was a great experience. Thank you.